On October 21st, 1772, Anne Bowden Coleridge gave birth to her 10th and final child, named Samuel. The father of all these children was the Right Reverend John Coleridge, the vicar of St. Mary's Church in Devon, England. The good Reverend died suddenly when Samuel was a very young boy, and with so many children suddenly left without provision, little Samuel was sent hundreds of miles away to an orphanage where he would spend the remainder of his childhood and his teenage years. Deprived of his father, separated from his mother, his great love in life became books, literature, stories, narrative, poetry. He read Robinson Crusoe, the Arabian Nights, Milton, Shakespeare, the Greek tragedians. In time, he became a great writer and poet himself, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the author of The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, his greatest work. It's a long and beautiful piece of poetry, almost 4,000 words long, broken into 7 parts, 150 stanzas. It would take me some 20 minutes to read it to you in its entirety this morning. What is it about? Well, in short, it's the telling of a tale by a boat captain who had lost his way at sea. This ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. And at first, everything works splendidly. Leaving the south of England, the water was fine, the sailing was good, but a fierce storm pushed the ship, the captain and his crew, south, and south still more, all the way to Antarctica. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It cracked and growled and roared and howled like noises in a swound. And then a miracle. A giant seabird, an albatross, appeared. And this miraculous bird led the mariner and his crew out of the cold, out of the ice. At length did cross an albatross. Through the fog it came, as if it had been a Christian soul. We hailed it in God's name. And soon the ship was back to the open sea in perfect weather. The water was fine. The sailing was good. But for some unknown, impulsive reason, in an act of stupidity, the mariner takes his crossbow, shoots at and kills the albatross. The crew is horrified by this callous, foolish, unwarranted act, and they know he has doomed all of them. They know that they will now all be cursed because a sailor never kills an albatross. It is a lucky bird. It is a good omen. And so what the crew does is they take the slain bird and they hang the albatross around the good captain's neck. Yes, this is where that expression comes from. I have an albatross hanging around my neck. They were trying to show to God or to the spirits of the sea that they were not the ones responsible. It was the captain who had done this foolish thing, but they would be the ones who would suffer for it. All directing wind ceased. The sails fell limp. The sun burned down on them, and the crew began dying of thirst until they were all gone. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard not a sigh nor a groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down, one by one. The souls dead from their bodies fly. They fled to bliss or to woe, and every soul it passed me by like the whiz of my crossbow. The ancient mariner is left alone, punishment for his crime. The dead crew on board, slimy sea snakes on the surface of the water, death sailing its own boat on the horizon, the brutal sun by day, the cold haunting moon at night, not even a hint of a breeze in the air, and the lifeless albatross hanging around his neck. The most famous lines from the poem. Alone, alone, all alone. Alone on a wide, wide sea, and never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. You ever felt like the ancient mariner? Lost, desperate, alone, surrounded by troubles. Now, maybe some of these troubles are of your own making. Maybe they are not. Maybe you are like the mariner's crew, troubled on all sides because of the actions or the foolish decisions of others. Maybe you feel like you might just, in fact, die if something doesn't change. Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea. Water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. More to the point this morning, worry, worry everywhere, and no relief in sight. Do you know what it is like to be stranded on an ocean of anxiety and worry? I'm returning today to a text that I apparently love more than most, within a book that percentage-wise I speak from more than most. The text is only 2 verses, Philippians 4, 6, and 7. But these verses, they are something. From the New Living Translation, these are Paul's words to the ancient church at Philippi. Ancient words more applicable today than in the day they were first put to parchment. Paul writes, "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need, thanking for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus." Worry, worry everywhere, to be sure. And Paul's advice is to ignore it all. Don't worry about anything, he says. Well, that's easier said than done, Paulie. Last year, the Wall Street Journal conducted a survey. "What worries you lately? We want to know," was the headline. The Journal cited a Gallup poll of some 150,000 people from 144 different countries. And that poll asked one question: what is your top concern? Worry was at the top of the list. You know what number 2 was? Stress. From all over the world. Worry, worry everywhere, to be sure. And so the Wall Street editors wanted to know what people were worrying about. What was stressing their readership? And people were most worried, I'll give you a list of some of the things. They were most worried about the future, about money, about aging and getting older. They responded with worries about our country, about misinformation, about the economy, about violence. They had worries about their jobs, their looks, their children, and whether or not their significant others still loved them. They were worried about their health, their families, reaching their goals in life, their pets, and the crime rates of their neighborhoods. They were worried about life changes, loneliness, failure, rejection, inadequacy, corruption at all levels in society, pollution of the drinking water, and the unregulated use of artificial intelligence, robotics, and social media. They were worried about terrorist attacks, the use of nuclear weapons, and the possibility of a world war. They were worried about getting injured, abandoned, divorced, or being put into nursing care. They were worried about everything. And the trend, this is not good news if you're under 40, the trend is moving in a youthful direction. That is, younger people are more anxious today than young people have ever been. Much of it is economic. The cost of living, particularly housing, is at an all-time high. The average age for a first-time home buyer is now over 40 years of age. Technology is eliminating jobs at a frightening pace. And today's younger generations have grown up with 24-hour news, instantaneous notification, and a window on the world in the palm of their hand. They see, hear, and experience every bad thing that happens in the world immediately as it occurs, and no one is built for that kind of knowledge. But young people are being conditioned to that from the youngest of ages. This is not the world of the Apostle Paul. Far from it. But his counsel can remain as sound as ever. Don't worry about anything. Why? Because I say this to my wife quite regularly. Most of the stuff that you worry about is never going to happen. You're just wasting your energy. Worries are driven by the fear of the future, fear of the unknown. Worry is the product of being out of control, as if you had any control in life in the first place. You can't control the aspects of your health, of your safety, or the safety of your loved ones. There is little you can actually do about the macro problems of the world. You can't save enough money, not likely, to ensure that you or your heirs will never have financial problems. What other people think about you shouldn't be a worry at all, because what other people think about you is none of your business in the first place. These and this whole long laundry list collected by the journal, we've got to put those away. And I'll hurry to say, and this is very important, Paul is not addressing general anxiety disorder or panic attacks or clinical depression, PTSD, OCD, or ADHD, phobia aversion, hormone therapy, or the lack of serotonin in someone's bloodstream. Because you should absolutely reject the pastor, teacher, preacher, or guru who tells you that persistent faith, prayer, and trying hard enough will overcome a diagnosed medical condition. If you break your arm, you don't call a prayer meeting and say, we're just going to pray about this arm and God will take care of it. You go see an orthopedic, I hope. Call the prayer meeting, yes. But get good, safe, reasonable, expert help. And mental health should be pursued the same way. We need to say our prayers, but we might also need a little therapy or a little Lexapro in our lives. You don't hear that from pulpits, but I said it. Because I work with a lot of people, and people are losing their minds in this world in which we live. And sometimes we need all the help we can get. So Paul isn't addressing medical conditions. But back to that prayer meeting he's talking about. Don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Tell God what you need. Thank Him for all He has done. I love the use of the indefinite pronouns here. Anything and everything. Don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Is your dog sick? Pray about it. Tell God what is bothering you. The health of your aging parent or your aging self, right? Jesus is on the main line, as the old song goes. Call Him up and tell Him what you need. Your job, your rent is due. The uncertain future, the war in Ukraine, the drought in the U.S. mountain region, the hurricane season. Worry, worry everywhere. And if it bothers you, pray about it. Use your energy in a more healthy way. Rather than just ruminating on all of your worries and calling that prayer, actually focus on the presence and power of God instead of the threats in every direction. I read a story once from a missionary's journal, and this was many years ago when I read it, and longer still, the missionary's experience. He was a medical missionary serving high in the Andes Mountains, South America. He was working amongst indigenous peoples, and most of them were still living in a very primitive way. Primitive farming, primitive transportation. And this doctor had one of the only pickup trucks in the entire region. And it's the only way that he could go village to village and see all of his patients. And one day, driving over the rough mountain roads, he picked up a woman who was walking from one village to another, and she had this heavy basket on her back. And she smiled, she was happy for the ride, and she climbed aboard in the back of the truck with her basket. And down the road, the missionary noticed that the woman was squatting in the back truck, but not sitting down. Her load still strapped in place on her back. And he stopped the truck to explain to this woman, taking her first ride ever in an automobile, that she could put the load down on the bed of the truck because the truck was strong enough to carry that load. She was convinced that she could ride on the truck, but she still had to hold on to the weight that she was carrying. All she really had to do was to transfer the basket over to a more capable and stronger vehicle and get the weight off of her own back. I mean, what a lesson, right? Because we talk about having faith, we talk about trusting God, and then we just sort of squat with our troubles and never take the load off and put it where it belongs. There's just a lot to be said, I think, about exhaustion, really. Once your worry list reaches a certain length, about the thickness of a vintage phone book, I guess, and you have a surplus of anxiety and plenty of things to fret about, it just wears you out, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it? Amen? You can't think. You can't eat. You can't sleep. You can't turn off your mind. You're worn to a frazzle. Well, good. You are probably approaching the place where prayerful surrender is all you have left. Because once you are exhausted, you'll just take whatever help you can find. And that's true of alcoholics, addicts, pill poppers, worrywarts, people pleasers, tryhards, perfectionists, fusspots, overthinkers, and fraidy cats. All of us. When you get tired enough, you will hand it all over because you realize that surrender is the only way that I'm going to survive. Because I can't carry this by myself. We had this great thing happen out at the Rusty Goat Farm this week. Braden, our son, our youngest son, spotted a stray dog that was loping and lurking along the highway. It was a German shepherd, a small one, either young or just undernourished. And he was so afraid that she was going to run into the road or get hit by a car. I don't know if you drive Highway 20 or Highway 81 in this county, but it's like an animal cemetery out there. Turkeys, hogs, cats, possums, skunks, dogs is a dangerous prospect to cross those roads. And if she stayed out of the road, she was had obviously been abandoned. You could count her ribs. She was out in the heat. She had no access to food or water. Coyotes are always around. And Braden and a few of his friends stopped to get this dog out of harm's way. But she would have no part of it. They walked and talked quietly. They moved slow. They offered treats. They offered food. They offered water. Someone came up with the idea of a trap. Every morning for a couple of days, every evening they went out, found her, wooed, begged, pleaded. And I finally told Braden, just give her time. You keep doing what you're doing, and she's going to reach a point where she is so tired, so thirsty, so hungry, and so exhausted that she'll just walk into your arms. And that's exactly what happened. Willingly, she surrendered. She even took to the leash as if she had been trained. Happily entered the kennel and the air conditioning. And off to the vet and the rescue she went. That pup right there doesn't know it yet, but her life was saved. And the life she will now live on the other side of her traumas and her troubles will be a magical, peaceful life. Peace, after all, is the goal. Serenity, to live light, to live easy. And peace is the ultimate result on the other side of our own surrenders. Don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Tell God what you need. Thank Him for what He has done. And then verse 7, then you will experience God's peace. A peace that will guard your hearts and guard your minds. The word that we have translated as guard is an armed garrison, a walled and towered city in the original Greek. That is, you will not be removed from your troubles or your worries, but you can be kept from being tormented by those worries. There's a wall of God's peace that surrounds your own heart. And the more tired you are, and if you're here this morning and you are exhausted by your anxieties, I've got good news. The more tired you are, the closer you are to leading a lighter, more free, more peaceful life if you will simply surrender. Even the ancient mariner figured this out in the end. As Samuel Taylor Coleridge weaved his tangled web, that old salty captain, seemingly responsible for the death of his crew, the albatross hanging around his neck and having water everywhere but not a drop to drink, found it impossible to pray. He clung to the mast of his ship like Jesus nailed to a cross, on his own hillside of death, abandoned, forsaken, hopeless. He looked out at the hideous sea creatures and he hated them. He looked out at the endless salty sea and he hated it. The albatross he had killed hanging around his neck, he despised it. He despised himself, but something finally broke and he couldn't stop himself. He couldn't explain his actions, but he accepted them. He took responsibility. Those ugly, twisting sea creatures, he began to see them as God's created creatures. God had made them. God loved them just as God loved the albatross. And those men who had died under his command, God was with them too, he concluded. And yes, even on that forsaken sea, without any apparent help, even there, God was with him. And with that realization, the ancient mariner was transported miraculously across the waters to his own village back home, safe and sound. And now the spell was snapped. Once more I viewed the ocean green and looked far forth. Swiftly, swiftly flew the ship, yet she sailed softly too. Sweetly, sweetly blew the breeze, on me alone it blew. Oh, dream of joy, is this indeed the lighthouse top that I see? Is this my hill? Is this the kirk? Is this my own country? I'll sing loud these godly hymns that He makes in the woods. He'll shrieve my soul. He'll wash away the albatross's blood. This frame of mine was wrenched with a woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale. And yet now, God has set me free. And that is the goal for all of us.